Search It Up with Sienna. On part 1 of this episode, I spoke with Academy Award-winning writer Tom Schulman. And on this part of the episode, I'm going to be speaking with mechanical effects coordinator Peter Chesney. In addition to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Peter also worked on Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Miller's Crossing, Waterworld, The Big Lebowski, The Truman Show, No Country for Old Men, and so many more. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Peter Chesney. Can you talk about how you got started in the field?
Yeah, it was strange by accident. I was a theater major, physics minor on the East Coast, and I wandered around trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a lot of years. And then a friend of mine, or girlfriend, said, let's go visit my brother-in-law who's making a movie about the Wright brothers in California. So I went out on a 10-day vacation, and we had to build all the Wright brothers airplanes and fly them for real. And they weren't ready, and I thought it was too interesting, so I never came back from my vacation. I'm still on vacation from 40 years ago.
And what is the difference between like mechanical effects and special effects?
Special effects is the general term. The Academy Award, they say visual effects, but it includes mechanical effects. In other words, the visual effects is everything to do with the computer and the green screen and putting in backgrounds and doing tricks, changing your age, all that kind of stuff. But mechanical effects is anything that moves, all the wind, the rain, explosions. We built a lot of materials. You interviewed Don Burgess. I worked with him.
Yeah.
He was a second unit cameraman, and I got a picture of him on top of a crane with a camera 900 feet over the Colorado River. And I was tying this car onto the crane with stunt people on it that drops off of a magnet. And my job was to make sure the car didn't fall off the wire. So it gets a little bit tricky, but
yeah, it seems like a lot of work.
But we've built a lot of heavy rigs. For instance, we built the floating set for Waterworld. I had to design all the steel for it and how you anchor it. It weighed 2,000 tons, 365 feet in diameter, and we had to build it in 3 months. Some shows are small and some shows are big. Eagle Eye, we had 82 effects guys, and then like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, we had about 20. On No Country for Old Men, we had 6. It just changes based on whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
I just have always been a builder. I like building things.
Yeah.
But I'm one of the few people who do visual effects also.
How did you get involved with the movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
We'd done a bunch of movies before then, and as you say, there's a lot of interconnections in the film business.
Definitely.
You work with the same people, not every year, but every few years, and your work is largely done based on reputation. And I was one of the larger of the local effects companies. Had a little shop in Burbank, and then we got asked to want to do the movie, but we didn't do it in Burbank. We did it in Mexico City.
Wow.
And so we had to pack up our trucks and load the trucks and ship them all the way to Mexico City. And they had 7 big stages in the middle of downtown Mexico City. And I got an apartment and rode my bicycle over to the stage and started trying to figure out the movie.
I know that you built like the ant and the shrink cannon, like the shrink ray for Honey I Shrunk the Kids. The first one, how did you do that? Did you have like a certain process?
Yeah, we built the ant in town. A lot of times you'll start with a sculpted miniature. You do a lot of drawings. The art department supplies you with artists. We're like the builder part. The construction department builds the movie sets, but anything that's strange that moves, then it's my problem. On the first film, you started trying to figure it out because everybody is this tall. 1/4 inch is our scale. A 6 foot person is 1/4 of an inch tall. And then when you think about that world, nothing is normal. We had they first get shrunk and end up in a trash bag, but when they're first shrunk, they're on a floor. But when you shrink down to 1/4 of an inch,
Hmm.
the texture of the floor is this deep. So we had sculpted the entire stage to look like one piece of wood with
Wow.
a nail, and they run around. And then because Wayne Selinsky can't see them because they're so small, they don't make any noise. They get swept up by a broom. Well,
Yeah.
I had to build a broom that was just a part of the broom was 30 feet high and 40 feet wide, weighed several thousand pounds, and we swung it across the stage on ropes.
Hmm.
And then the kids are running. Because remember, this is the days before blue screens where everybody did it in the computer. Here you do it
Yeah.
for real. So we even made the harnesses that the children get in. So we would measure you and make you a harness that fits under your clothes, and you carry your weight by your thighs mostly, because that's the best place to carry the weight of somebody, because
Hmm.
anywhere else starts to hurt after a little while. But
Hmm.
they're running across the stage floor with two wires coming off their hip pins, and then we let the broom go behind them as they're running, and it catches up, and then we pull them up into the broom and let them all go together. That was just one little piece.
Wow.
Then they had to make a giant dustpan, and they had pieces of flies. Um, if you ever go back to look at that movie, I'm looking at a screen off to the side where I've got some pictures back then. Um, it had the grooves of a dustpan in it. The art department made the grooves, but then we had a rig and decided how steep it was, and then slid all the kids down and electronics parts and a dead fly that was the size of a horse, you
Yeah.
know, that kind of stuff. And then we had a whole nother set that was the backyard grass set, and the leaves were 35 feet tall, and the whole thing was like 100 by 150 feet.
Wow.
Uh, and all the leaves were sculpted and cast in urethane and then stood up. Um, it was a, and then the whole floor is uneven. And then later we get into the raindrops. The raindrops were really hard because when you look really close at a raindrop, when a raindrop is um, bigger than a beach, raindrop is, you know,
Yeah.
big as half a horse. And so we had to figure out how to make the raindrops look like they're tiny or in the small scale. So we had to build an air cannon with a cone on it, shaped like that, and then fill it up with a thick liquid so that the liquids would stick and do something interesting. Um, but we had to find something because we were going to slime the kids. So you had to find something that was safe for the kids'
Yeah.
eyes and their mouth. And it took a lot of research and how thick it was. And it's a methacellulose. It's one of the thickeners you find in milkshakes and some fast food places to make
Yeah.
make things thick. So you had to figure out how thick it was. You had to figure out how much air pressure to use, and you had to figure out the shape of the cone.
Hmm.
And so it was like um, Edison. It took like 200 tests to find the right combination. And then we built 16 of those, and they all went into the floor. And then the kids would run through, and we'd start setting them off like they were mortars. And one of the kids got whacked really good, and we found out he could curse really good. That was funny.
How big was the shrink cannon? Because you're telling me how there was like as big as a horse, all of the stuff that you had to build. So how big was the shrink cannon?
Um, well, the shrink cannon was small, and we decided it had to have personality. So we built it mechanically so that it would it would sit up like that on a parallelogram,
Yeah.
and then it could turn and root around. So you wanted it to come alive. So mechanically, we added chains and a parallelogram to make it stick up when it became alive. I was the mailman that starts the movie.
Really?
Yeah, if you look at the very beginning, when they're in the neighborhood and they come down and the mailman comes up and puts the letter in the mailbox, then
Yeah.
they, I was in a production meeting and they said, um, Randall, the director, had sent me a note, said, you want to be the mailman? And I said, whatever. And in the first movie, the editor was the mailman. It was a tradition. The editor of the first movie was the mailman in the first movie. And since I did both movies, then I was the mailman in the second movie.
Yeah, and I actually, which actually just reminded me, when I did the Goonies, I talked to Nick McLean from it, and he wasn't in the cast; he was a crew member, and he actually had to play a role in it because they asked him to because they couldn't find a role for that part.
I actually made a part for the Goonies movie.
Really?
There was an octopus arm that they wanted to maybe use, and I had made one before, and so they rented mine to figure it out. In fact, it's over in that side of my dungeon somewhere.
That's so cool!
Yeah,
Wow.
because it's a smaller business than people think.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. That's exactly what my show is about, like how everybody's all interconnected. And talking about Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, I know that
Yeah.
you created the shoes for that. How big were the shoes in
18 feet,
that? Wow.
weighed 1,500 pounds, and we had to make a shoehorn to get them in a trailer. We
Hmm.
had to, because they were a little bit too wide for the trailer. So we got slippery plastic and put it on both sides of the truck and then shoved the shoe into the big truck. And then we took those to Las Vegas, and then we made pants legs. Um, we had to make the chest of a 115-foot baby, and that's what the shoe size was. But we also had to do the chest, and the chest had to be big enough to put a real car in the front pocket.
Hmm.
But to make the fabric, is supposed to be scale corduroys, like corduroy jean material, a red corduroy. Well, I hired seamstresses, and everybody got together, and you use sheep shears to take shag carpet and cut grooves into the carpet to make the corduroy
Wow.
by hand. And it was 35 feet across and 25 feet high, or 35 feet high. And when we were assembling it, it had to be stitched together. So we had to teach the seamstresses to be mountain climbers. We gave them harnesses and climbing ropes so they could be on the outside 20 feet in the air while they're sewing. So you get into everything when you do this stuff. It's no,
Definitely. You have to like
no,
get into the character.
yeah. So it was that kind of stuff. Going
Hmm.
back to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, um, we had a dandelion that gets sucked up by the lawnmower wind machine.
Yeah.
And remember, there's no computers then. And so we connected every single one of the little dandelion stems. They're about that big around and about that long.
Uh-huh.
And we connected them to individual tiny black strings that went to really long rubber bands, little pieces of rubber band that were each rubber band was 20 feet long, and
Well,
it stretched all the way to the floor of the stage. So you stretched it 30 feet so that the string would pull it right towards the camera from the bottom of the stage all the way into the rafters.
yeah.
Because each one of those, so we had 40 strings going to 40 of the little fluffies, all attached to 40 rubber bands,
Oh
and they
my.
all had to be let go in a little fast series to make it look like they're blown up and blown away. That's actually one of my more favorite special effects because it worked really well with just rubber bands and string.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes rubber bands and string works a lot better than computers.
Well, do you work closely with the director, the production designer, or the cinematographer more?
Um, it's a process. It starts with the script and you look at it and you try to imagine what does the camera need, because you have to put your camera brain on. And the thing about camera brains is you only have one eye. You only have one, if you look at stuff this way, it looks different than this way. And so you get to cheat because the camera can't tell how far away stuff is. So that's part of how you have to think
Yeah.
that I'm allowed to cheat because there's only one eye, but, and I don't have to make anything that's not inside the frame. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to worry about what's over there or whatever there. If I can make this part work, then I'm doing my job. But you
Yeah.
go through the script and you try to figure out what is not a movie set, what is not, what's going to wiggle or do something weird, like, oh, there's a 12-foot ant. Who's going to make it? Sometimes makeup effects people make it. This time we made it. I had a really talented guy, David Sasala, who does a lot of visual effects now.
Mm-hmm.
He ran. I had to rent a second shop just to work on that. Um, and you started from a sculpture this was big, and then you scaled it, and then we figured out that I could put lots of assistants holding the bottom of the feet of the ant. So when you saw the ant go anywhere, there was 10 people crawling on their hands and knees, moving each leg of the ant and pulling it around. But we study the script, we break it down, we mark it up, look at each scene, try to figure out, because they don't want you to spend all the money there is on the planet. So you have to come up with a budget. But then you work with the production designer because he starts describing what he's going to build for the set that you're going to work in, and then the the director of photography you work with a lot because you have to ask him, what do you see?
Yeah.
Do you have smoke in the air? That's one of the jobs. um, does everything look right? Do you see a wire? um, if you see some guy in the background, can I stick a leaf on his head to make him disappear? So you rely on him to say that it looks good or it looks bad. So he's your, eyes and ears of what's going on. And you come up with a plan based on designs, and then you get with the director, the DP, and the production designer, and everybody tries to figure out the path that fits the amount of money you have to work with.
I know that you mentioned in the beginning that you have sometimes you have 82 people on your team, sometimes you have 6 people on your team. Do you
Yeah,
have the same members of your team work on each movie with you?
a lot of them. Um, this woman, Sandy Stewart, has worked with me for going on 30 years. You have to you work so hard, it's important that the people you work with are like family.
What was the most memorable part of working on both Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Honey, I Blew Up the Kid?
Well, we had lots of fun with the raindrops and the ant. The raindrops were extra fun because you didn't know if it was going to be successful till it was successful, and then we got to blast the kids for days, and that was kind of a lot of fun. See if you could whack them. One of them was extra bratty, so we picked on him more.
I heard that you were about to start the movie Shrunk, and right before the pandemic hit. Do you expect to start that up again soon? How do you think effects on this will be different from the original movies?
We don't know. We shut down in like February, right? We just started, and then it came in. We had Joe Johnson was going to be the director again, and I had a good time working with him on the first one. And Jim Bissell, who I did Ring 2 with, was going to be the production designer. But we don't know what's happening. It's still completely shut down. It may or may not start again.
Yeah,
The have a problem is you don't have movie theaters right now.
yeah,
So that's it's easier to do stuff for the internet than it is for movie theaters. So it may be another year. We just don't know what's going to happen. But
yeah.
they are shrunk this big again.
Back to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids real quick.
Yeah.
I know how you were talking about the ant and all that stuff, and that reminded me. Do you know like how big? Like, did you work on the big cookie that they ate when they saw the big like Oreo?
Yeah. Oh, that was about 18 feet in diameter.
Wow.
Because they would.
Real cookie? That was probably a real cookie if they ate it. So.
No, what it is they made a sculpture out of plaster and foam and then painted it. But the part where they grab and eat is
Oh.
where they put a little divot and then it got a match color and put, like a thick whipped cream kind of edible material that you can do.
Uh-huh.
Later, we had um, they fell into the pool with um, the thick rain where there's
Oh
a
yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
fly. She gets knocked in. We had to make 5,000 gallons of the thick slime material, which
Wow.
is um, strange stuff. And it had to be a stunt girl because you had to worry about how to swim in it.
Yeah.
And we had, you almost had to get them out with a spoon. It was real thick.
Yeah.
And then we used the same material with white food color for the bowl full of milk and cereals.
Oh yeah.
And the big Cheerio is made with sculpted foam sprayed on giant truck tires, inner tubes.
I'm also a big fan of the movie The Truman Show, and you were the boat effects designer, I know, for The Truman Show. What did that involve? Was it life sized?
But I was in charge of the storm sequence. Well, I don't know if you can see right there. That's
Yeah.
actually a half model of my sailboat.
Oh wow.
And my sailboat was my grandfather's sailboat, and it's 100 and uh, let's see, it's 116 years old now. I still
Wow.
have it. I was showing Dennis Gasner, the production designer, pictures of my summer vacation. The director, Peter Weir, came up behind us, looked over and said, that's the kind of boat I want for the Truman. So the Truman Show boat is a 3/4 scale copy of my 100-year-old sailboat.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and so we had to build a hydraulic gimbal for it. We bought two of them, one that sailed for real in Florida and one that we took to the lake up at the top of Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And then I had to build the dump towers that made the water fly. And we had a jet engine that we stuck fire hoses in to make the spray really good. And we made 5,000-pound wave makers. So when we do weather, sometimes we have to make the stuff that makes the weather.
Yeah.
And the
Hmm.
whole thing was about putting so much water in the air that you couldn't see anything else but the
Hmm.
scene.
Yeah.
So there was a whole lot of goofiness there. Very wet movie. I've gotten involved in a lot of water movies for some reason.
And do you have a film you worked on that you felt was the most challenging experience?
Well, Waterworld was the most challenging. 2,000 tons to float people in the ocean off of the coast of Hawaii. Hudsucker Proxy had a whole lot of real interesting things in it. A lot of people haven't seen that movie. It was the one of the Coen brother films,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to drop Tim Robbins from the ceiling on his back. We had to teach them how to hula hoop. We used the nitrogen trick again to make snow to fall on their face up close so it would melt. We had it look like a big bed spring full of liquid nitrogen and then a shaker to shake the frost to create the close-up so it didn't look like plastic snow.
How have computers and technology changed your job today?
Some ways it makes it easier, some ways it makes it harder.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that you like that's makes it easier is you don't have to hide the wires anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you flew people on wires, you were trying to use the smallest wire that won't break. And that makes you nervous. So now you use bigger wires and they just, the computer just erases the wires. It's not even expensive. It's all about how the wires connect to the clothes. Because if the clothes are all bulged out, then it's a lot of work for the computer.
And I want to thank you so much for doing this. I had so much fun talking to you, and you had so many great things to say, and I learned so much about mechanical effects now, and it just inspired me now to build stuff. Well, thank you.
Loads of fun.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chesney. It was so interesting to hear about how the effects were built and operated. And now, before we search it up, here's a quick fun fact. Did you know that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was made into a ride at Disneyland called Honey, I Shrunk the Audience? Basically, Win Selinsky is accepting his award for his shrink machine, when the shrink machine actually accidentally goes off and it shrinks you guys, the audience. It sounds so much fun. I'd love to go on it. And now it's time to search it up. Let's see. Oh, Tom Schulman, who I just spoke to in part 1 of this episode, wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but also wrote What About Bob? So, we'll see you next time to talk about What About Bob.